what would actually be the cost of that war. There was a interesting and kind of darkly funny incident that occurred recently online and in real life that I think highlights the U.S. thinking on Taiwan. And it started with our friend Garland Nixon tweeting one of his satirical tweets that highlights the truth about the Biden administration's foreign policy. As a result of Garland's tweet, I guess we'll start with his tweet. Garland tweeted on February 15th, breaking news, White House insiders leak that when asked if there could be any greater disaster than the neocon Ukraine project, President Biden responded, "Wait until you see our plan for the destruction of Taiwan." Okay, well, that wasn't exactly true. Garland's being tongue-in-cheek, but in a way it is true. It rests on a foundation of truth. It's funny because it's true. So some people did not correctly interpret Garland's humor, and that would be leading opposition figures from the Kuomintang or KMT party in Taiwan, who are actually starting to step up and take on the DPP, the Democratic People's Party, that's completely on board for U.S. escalation against China. And one of their leading lawmakers, Alex Tsai, translated Garland's tweet into Chinese and posted on Facebook that a notable journalist in the U.S. has said that there is a White House plan for the destruction of Taiwan. Everyone went bonkers over this in Taiwan. The Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a statement and a challenge to the State Department to clarify it. Once again, it was satire. So the Taiwanese government has now introduced a law to criminalize the spreading of rumors or disinformation during wartime, a real tribute to Taiwanese democracy that we're fighting for, just because of Garland's tweet. Well, yeah, there's no need to show that. But what's interesting, and Garland pointed this out, is that there is a plan for the destruction of Taiwan. It's out there in the open. All you have to do is look for it at the Center for Strategic and International Policy, which conducted a war game earlier this year in January on a potential conflict between the United States and Chinese militaries over Taiwan. And it basically started with a Chinese amphibious invasion of Taiwan that the U.S. seeks to repel. This was funded by the Smith-Richardson Foundation, by the way, which sponsors so many militaristic think tanks and neoconservative endeavors in Washington. So it's not exactly, their findings are not exactly going to be slanted against the U.S. military. What did they find in the simulation? The U.S. and its allies lost dozens of ships, maybe an entire carrier fleet, hundreds of aircraft, and tens of thousands of service members. Think about that. When was the last time the U.S. lost tens of thousands of service members and Taiwan saw its economy devastated? You figure if its economy was devastated, its society was devastated as well. This article that I highlighted from Air and Space Forces actually called in an expert who said that any conflict between the U.S. and China would lead to a massive change in the way that Americans live and see their country because of the existential crisis that it would produce. And then you have the U.S. Army War College, which produced a paper in late 2022. This was kind of buried in the paper, but some close readers found this, and it said they were advising the Taiwanese government to commit economic suicide in order to repel a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, that if news of an invasion arrived, Taiwan would destroy its main superconductor factory and thereby destroy the most important chip maker in the world and China's most important supplier, to make an occupation of Taiwan untenable and unappealing. But that would be the end of Taiwan's economic claim to fame, which is being the world capital of superconductor production. So that's what the U.S. military and its finest minds have in store for Taiwan. And yet the Democratic People's Party of Taiwan has openly welcomed, they tweeted today that they openly welcome a $619 million weapons sale from the Biden administration to Taiwan. So they're openly welcoming this. And so Garland was right in a way. And the war of words over his tweet, although it was a satirical tweet, cannot be dismissed as a war over disinformation or a misunderstanding. it's where we're heading right now as the US and its military speak much more openly than they ever have before about a war with China, as Keith Kellogg said.
Yeah, Meet the Press featured the Center for New American Security's war game last year. I put the clip there if you want to play it. And there's another clip we can play too of Nicholas Burns, the U.S. ambassador to China, this week admitting what all this is about. He says that we're the leader in the Asia-Pacific region, and China needs to recognize that. That's what all this is about, pretty much.
Let's take a listen to Nicholas Burns.
Our American position is stronger than it was 5 or 10 years ago. It's the strength of our alliances. It's the strength of our private sector. It's our innovative capacity and our R&D capacity, which comes from our research institutions and our big tech companies. And I do think that the Chinese now understand that the United States is staying in this region. We're the leader in this region in many ways, and that we want a future of peace with China. We don't want, as the President Biden makes clear every time he talks about this, we don't want conflict, but we're going to hold our own out here. And I feel optimistic. I'm just concluding my first year as ambassador about the American position in this country and in this region.
So I love how when he says, we're the leader in this region. And then there's a little bit of a pause. There's a little bit of a pause, a small, and then he says, he qualifies it. He says, in many ways. And I don't think he initially meant to say we're the leader in this region in many ways. I think he meant to say we're the leader in this region. And then he realized to himself, oh, it doesn't sound so good if we're declaring that we're the leader in this region. So let me qualify that. Let me water that down a little bit and say in many ways to make it sound more palatable. But that is right there is an expression of how the U.S. sees the world. This is the U.S. ambassador to China declaring that his country is the leader in China's region. It says it all.
Yeah, we remember John Bolton, as NSC director to Donald Trump, and war-crazed walrus said that the U.S.'s policy towards Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba was a Monroeist policy, drawing on the Monroe Doctrine, which declared that all of Latin America was the backyard of the U.S. and it would not allow foreign interference there. Well, as neo-colonial as Bolton's statement was, an outright imperialist, at least he was drawing on some kind of American tradition and document, whereas Nicholas Burns is just simply asserting total U.S. control of a region that is thousands of miles away, which shares absolutely no border with the United States. And it's consistent with the rhetoric we hear about China moving more aggressively into the South China Sea. It's like, we got to do something there. Yeah. So we are hurtling toward another conflict that would be existential for the United States, as the U.S. has failed to succeed in the Ukraine proxy war and it cannot even define victory. And you're starting to see that narrative trickle out in mainstream media that Ukraine and the U.S. and its U.S. backers need to define victory. What does it even mean? But at the same time, they're pushing for a conflict with pretty much all of Eurasia, at least the two most powerful, resource-rich countries, with the most of the population, and China with the largest industrial base on the planet. This is insane.